Hi, my name is Johan van Skalkwyk, and we will be handling a topic today which is very close to my heart, and that is how to sell your consulting engineering services. Now, I've got Paul with me, and Paul's a mechanical engineer. And Paul, if you don't mind, don't you want to do a brief introduction?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yes, background, mechanical engineer, did a VITS way back. I think what was interesting at that stage, I came out there with aeronautical option. I implemented one of the first computerized maintenance management systems in the country in the early days down at Unilever, of all places. That was my first introduction into maintenance and into systems. I think as I progressed, I had to end up going 2 years in the Army, and I came out and joined a company where we did maintenance software. And I worked as a project engineer, program manager, implementing systems. And I think early on I realized that it's great as engineers, we learn, we can implement, but nobody actually ever taught us how to do business. Certainly, I never got any training of actually how to sell anything or do anything. And I realized to be successful, one had to be able to sell. Whatever that meant at that stage, I wasn't too sure. So I decided, let me go and learn how to be a salesman. And I joined one of the big IT companies as a salesman, and I learned a lot. I progressed through there, I did engineering systems, became a divisional sales manager. I had a sales team all over the country. I learned a lot. And then the company I was at before asked me to come back, and I took over the global sales and marketing function. And I've been involved in really selling complex engineering solutions all over the world for many years. And over that period, I found out what works and what doesn't work. And probably a lot of the illusions and myths around sales that I had really changed, and I come to terms with that. And probably the last 10 years, I decided to take a lot of the lessons I'd learned of being successful as an MD of a big company, and how to apply it back into the engineering space, into people and engineers. And I think one thing I want to say, I always get, probably I was the same when I started off as an engineer. We hated sales. Sales was almost a swear word. We're professionals, we learned how to think, and our version of sales was, we'd seen it on television, on films, the second-hand car salesman who rolls the odometer back or puts something in the gearbox. So, and you almost had to lie to be in sales. Or the traditional encyclopedia salesman who put the foot in the door and sell you something you want. And we said, well, I don't want to be like that. I'm a professional. I believe in things. And it took a while to really understand what sales really was about. I've been doing that for a long time now. I've been very successful and work a lot with engineers.
Yeah, you see, that exactly is my question, my next question. Engineers. I don't want to box engineers, but if you look at the personality and the character, they're not salespeople. Now, if you're not a salesperson and you sell your time, that's most probably the hardest job to do in the world. So you sit with a personality that's not a salesman, that needs to sell time, which is an extremely difficult thing to do. So what the hell?
Well, you're right. In fact, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit of what a salesperson is. I think we have that definition of what should be as a natural salesman. Actually, whenever I work with organizations, sales teams, or actually broader thing, consulting organizations, I always go in first and say, right, guys, who's in sales? Put your hand up. And nobody puts their hand up. But in fact, in reality, everybody is in sales all the time. Dealing with a contract, dealing with your boss, dealing with your employees, dealing with clients, you're always selling something. And I think I like to define sales maybe slightly differently to what we traditionally understand it to be. And I always want to just use a quote here, which I really enjoy from Jack Welch, who a lot of you know from previous head of GE and one of the gurus on it. He says, one thing we've discovered with certainty is that everything we do that makes a customer more successful inevitably results in a financial return for us. So making it more successful. Over many years, I've tried to define what success is and what it means. And coming down to it, I define success as achievement of purpose. Why are you in business? What are you trying to do? So success is achievement of that. So people will end up buying things or getting things which help them achieve that purpose, that success. So they look at value. So they need to understand what value is and how you can add value into that. And a question I was just looking at, I always ask people as well, okay, that's fine. So what's value? And then I also say, well, guys, while we're all in this, what's the most important language of sales in this country? And people think, well, maybe it's English, or maybe it's Afrikaans, or maybe it should be Chinese these days. And actually, no, it's not. It's actually the language of your customer. And that's important to understand what it is. So coming back to what you're saying, yes, engineers, we have this perception of a salesperson is this person who goes out and he's got the gift of the gab and talks and never shuts up and wants to do things. But in reality, I believe a salesperson is somebody who adds value to their clients, their customers, their prospects. And now, in order to add value, you have to understand what the person you're dealing with values. And that means asking them, understanding it, talking to them. And in fact, I found engineers make exceptional salespeople.
Okay.
And why? I mean, as engineers, most of us are taught how to think, hopefully, and we're certainly taught how to problem solve. Those are probably some of our basics in our DNA and our makeup. So when you're dealing with a client, what you want to understand is what they value. Then you have to think through it and come up with a solution to that. And selling, in that case, is adding value, and it's about listening more than asking. I think, again, one of the fears we have, I found with salespeople and engineers specifically, is we know things, we have answers, we've thought through it, and we know it's the best solution. So we want to go and tell people this is what you need, right? Actually going back into it. Actually, you raised another point there, which I just wanted to talk about. We talk sales, and there's a well-used term of sales engineers. And I think we must understand that engineers selling and sales engineers are very different things. A sales engineer typically is, my experience, is someone who understands product knowledge and actually someone you can put in front of a customer to talk about the product itself. Where engineers actually selling is selling who you are. And you said services especially are very, very difficult. Selling a product is often easy because you have your features and you can sell it, and we can have a comfort zone in that. When you start selling services, it's intangible. How do we link that there? And when you're selling services, you end up selling yourself, not the product. And none of us generally know how to sell ourselves. We don't like it. We don't like being boastful. So we actually find it very hard to sell ourselves.
Okay. Let's just take a step back here. The landscape of the engineering or the built environment has changed substantially.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
Well, I think there are a couple of things on that. And if I look back, in South Africa where we're talking in the old days, we actually didn't have to sell too hard. The business came to us. If you were good, the economy was booming, buildings were going up everywhere, people were building stuff. They came to us and you got the work relatively easily. Yes, you had to have ability, you had to deliver, but you didn't actually have to go out there and really sell it. Now, it's not quite that simple. It's not tougher out there. We also have a lot more international competition from different areas. It becomes almost what we're providing becomes a global commodity. Companies I was having people work on projects all over the world, and I was bringing people in from all over the world to work on projects here. So from that perspective, yes, we actually have to go out there and sell ourselves. I believe the work is there, but it's not just going to come to us. Again, I think a lot of us, how it's changed as well, we got very used to respond to tenders and you come out and you fill in this massive document and you submit it. It doesn't really achieve anything. You spend a lot of time and not get there. So what's changed? You need to create that personal contact, that relationship, that rapport. How do you actually add value to customers? I believe that's what's changed. And there are ways to do that. But I think the fundamental thing now, you can't just be an engineer, certainly not in a consultancy, do that and expect people to come to you. The other maybe difference I've seen is there are far more people selling their services. Unfortunately, the economy is tough. So a lot of consulting organizations out there, and a lot of engineers are going out on their own or starting up their own businesses. And rather than having this massive corporation who goes and brings you a project to go into, you actually have to go out and get it. And often we don't know how to do that. And suddenly without that big name behind us, it's actually quite hard.
That's the one aspect of it, and that environment it's totally different now. We've seen it with the candidates coming through. We see the requirements that's been latched to it as well. One of my biggest concerns, and I've seen this many times as well, the clients, more often than not, I'm sure, knows the engineering fees better than the actual engineers.
Yes.
So, Now we come to fee discounting and that arena.
Right.
What's your take on that?
The old argument, should you sell on price or shouldn't you? And of two parts to this, and I can say what I found works, what you want to do and what really happens. Personally, I don't like selling on price, and certainly I don't like trying to sell on an hourly rate. That's nice to say that. If you're selling projects or programs, I try and encompass and sell the whole thing. But if you're working on it, and you have to sell an hourly rate, and those are fixed. So the trick I found is you've got to get the person to understand the value that you have. And if they understand value, I find price falls away. And there are ways we can do that of how we identify it, and we identify what the benefits are in terms of monetary numbers. And then the rate falls away. But what I found was nothing worse than discounting rates or prices. I found it disastrous in the selling process. It doesn't mean you can't reduce your price, but discounting and how often it's termed. So I've offered you, I'm going to do a certain job, and it's going to cost you, let's just say 100,000 Rand to do this job, and that works out at X number of hours. And the person says, well, I can't afford that. The person down there is offered me less. They say, well, okay, well, then I'll actually do it for less. I'll do it for 80,000, not 100,000. What I find happens there is the perception is, well, why are you suddenly dropping your price to give me the same thing? It means you actually were deciding to overcharge me in the first place. Therefore, are you ethical? Are you there? So it creates that breakdown of trust. What I found works, if he says, well, I can't afford 100,000 Rand, I can only afford 80,000 Rand. Say, okay, but then I can only give you 80,000 Rand's worth of services. You have to reduce what you're offering to maintain that element of trust and value. And again, the whole thing of the best and final offer and these things. You can't give a best and final offer, then drop it. And I think we are very quick to try and fall back to price. It's that area that we sort of feel comfortable but uncomfortable with, because we often feel we're not worth the value we're selling. And that's normally untrue. So it's important that you identify value and actually then link it back and show no matter what you're charging, the value is there. And I find in many cases what happens, so you charge a certain amount and it says, well, let's work it back. The hourly rate is this, so therefore it's X number of hours. It's very hard at a professional level in doing services to link your work into hours because you're actually doing a lot of other things. You're not just doing piecework where you sit there and do something. We are in a thinking game, a knowledge business. And so knowledge requires things beyond that. So yes, it's a difficult one. Tenders is a classic one, but if you're selling directly, try and stay away from that and bring it in at the end.
Okay. Don't you want to put the relationship between connecting with people, building that relationship and that trust that goes with it, versus hardcore selling? Because selling is one thing, but should the two go hand in hand? What's that space there?
I think the relationship and what we mean by hardcore selling, and let's come back to what I talked about is adding value. And in fact, a lot of what I've developed over many years and the team we've got developed over many years is based on our experience of leadership. We do a lot around leadership development and training of senior people, and we all be leaders ourselves. And what we found to be very effective in leadership is adding value to the people around you. The whole concept of servant leadership, which is fairly well known. But to be an effective leader, you add value to the people around you and they'll follow you. We've found leadership and sales are very, very similar. So in a sales process, in essence what you're doing is leading your client or customer towards a solution. So we've developed the whole concept, what we call servant salesmanship, which is almost what it says. You as the salesperson are serving your customer, how to add value to that. So we've got developed a process over time of actually how to do that. And let me take you through that, and I'll try and say where the hardcore sales, as we define it, comes into it. The first thing, we call it CHAMP, how to be a sales champion, C-H-A-M-P, which is a nice little acronym you can remember. C stands for client. You've got to understand who the client is you're selling to, even more so if you're an engineer, services. And when I say who, it's not the name of the company, it helps, but actually the individual who's actually going to be making the decision. And then you need to understand who they are, what they're about, and very clear about who that is. I think a lot of times as well, we spend our time, our efforts going in and selling to the wrong people. We get into a company, sell to a low-level person who can't actually make a decision or whatever else. So we've got to understand who that person is. Often very difficult in a tender scenario, but it needs to be done. Once we've done that, we need to try and understand what that person's value requirements are. And we find that out, what I call H, the next one, which stands for higher purpose. What's the higher purpose of our client, the person we've identified, we're working with? What do they actually value? Once we understand what they value and what they really want and value, we can then provide A, which is our answer, our solution. What are we going to be providing to them to meet that value? So it could be anything. I mean, some things I find it, if you're building something, it could be, right, I need to build this thing, or with mining equipment, I need to get this thing running, so I need a motor of a certain size or whatever to actually achieve that. Or it could be something as simple as, right, I don't want to spend my weekends up in Africa when a plant breaks down going and fixing it. I want it to be reliable. Whatever it is, we need to understand that. So our solution answer is that. Then the next one, which is M, which we call meaning. So what does the person we're dealing with understand our solution to be giving him? So once we've done that, he'll see and say, right, this thing is actually going to meet this purpose, meet this value, therefore I want it. And the final one is P, which we say is personal. What makes you different? And that's actually the delivered value. Because it's absolutely imperative that you differentiate yourselves. Because what we actually want at the end is the client we're dealing with, what do we want him to do? Yes, we want him to use our product and to pay us. But in fact, we want him to carry on using us. We don't just want a single sale. So if we develop one, we want to come back to us again and again and again. And in fact, we want him to tell his friends to buy from us. I think the biggest thing we can get is you going and telling somebody you know, go and use this person. It's trust. This is referral. So ultimately, it's actually selling. So when we come back to the hardcore sales, we often have this hardcore sales, the guys cold calling, knocking on doors and going there and doing all these tricks to close a deal. In fact, if you go through this process, the deal almost closes itself, and our customers become our best salespeople, certainly in this business, because we're selling ourselves, they're buying into us. And the old saying, who do people buy from? They buy from people they know, like, and trust. How do we do that? So I don't know if that answers the question a bit,
Yeah,
a bit of a process.
It does. A few terms, or a few scenarios. I've seen many cases where a brilliant engineer is put in a managerial position and it fails. Now, what would your advice be for a company or an engineer? Do you go and identify certain people, put them through the acid test, and let them do their sales? How do you handle that? Because not everybody's built for it.
Absolutely, and everyone's different, and we all have our own strengths and weaknesses. And what's important is to understand what we're good at and what we're not good at. I think that was part of my growing up, and I think most of us have been through there. When we first come out, we can do anything and everything. And as we progress up through our careers, both in management and engineering, I think we come more to terms of our own egos and what we can do and not do. So we've got to understand what we're good at. And what we should be focusing on is the things we're good at, not the things we're bad at. If we end up focusing on the things we're bad at, we end up averaging out and become mediocre. So what I've found has been effective in doing business, and certainly doing sales and building relationships, is to do it through teams. You cannot necessarily do it all yourself. So you need to know what you can do. And if you're not so good at something else, bring somebody else in. So in an engineering consultancy, or you've got more than one engineer, you may have someone who's brilliant at design or doing something, and somebody who's great at playing golf. But you can bring these different skills together. It's teams. And we always use the term hunt in packs, work as teams, bring other people in. So coming back in a company, who should go and do sales? Well, we're all in sales all the time. It's just being aware of how to do it. And it doesn't mean going out there and going through this hardcore sales process and learning 101 sales closing techniques and how we do it. It's not that. In fact, some of the most effective business deals we've found has come through the people who aren't the salespeople. So if you have a project team out on site, so you've sold it or deals there, now you've got a team out on site. They are at the customer's premises all the time. If they start listening, they'll start picking up, maybe there's a need, there's a requirement, and that actually leads to further business. It's not actively going out. It's not a 1, 2, 3-step process. I've got to do this, and then I've got to try this and this and this. It's actually knowledge. The other thing I say, just be yourself. Don't try and be something you're not. You've got to be passionate about what you are. Maybe that's an important term. You've got to believe, certainly I have, I've got to believe in what I'm providing, in the value I'm having. I can't fake it. And I think most of us think early on, as a salesperson, I've got to fake my belief. I've got to fake, I believe this is the best thing since sliced bread. I can't do that, and it doesn't work. You've really got to believe and have passion and value in what you are. And often, your most effective salespeople work. I'll give an example. A good story. I remember way back when we were selling some systems, and large engineering systems, computer-based ones. And we took a client across to, it was a big project in the UK, one which digs a tunnel under the channel. And they were using the system. And we took these guys across, and they got them to demo it. And it was this guy sitting back, long hair, no shoes on, feet up on the desk, using this software. And he started demoing this product to these people. And he thought, no, we're dead. These guys are going to walk away. When we left there, they said, we're going to buy your product, because if that person can use it, anybody can. So I think the key thing is, let's not stereotype what it is or not. We're all in sales. It's an attitude and approach. But you don't need to be anything special. Just be yourself, be genuine, be authentic, and believe and have passion in what you're selling and what your product is.
Okay, now this is the hardcore stuff. Where do you start? If you're an engineer or you work for a company or CEO of a company, where do you start? What's out there that you can use as a start to moving in that direction of having your engineers selling your time or your product effectively?
It's again, I think it's a process, it's a mindset, it's a culture. I think the first thing is, what I found is not to say we have sales and we have non-sales. So here's our sales guys, and we have a team who go out there, and then we have the guys who sit in the back rooms. Everybody's involved in that. So it's learning how to communicate, learning how to have that self-belief, and actually understanding the value you actually deliver. Now, some of the things it's easier. I'm coming back to some engineering things. Maybe it's almost a commodity product. Okay, we're talking services. But let's say you're selling nuts and bolts, a real commodity item. How can you get passionate about a nut and a bolt, or a bearing? A bearing's a good one. So you've actually got to link that by having, say, coming back to my mining example, where you put plants up in the middle of Africa. If one of your main bearings fails on your plant, the thing goes down. And if it goes down, how long is it going to be down for? How long is it going to take? You have to go up there. So the value is not the bearing, it's actually the work you provide and the things around. You've got to understand that. So people understand the value they're giving, they start getting more passionate about it. And the other thing is, people understand every time they interact with anybody, it's in a selling process. You're representing a company yourself. Ask questions, talk, and listen. And one of the tricks, the basic tricks I learned very early on was effective selling is about asking questions rather than giving answers. Yes, you have to give an answer later on, but initially, just ask questions. You don't need to go in there and solve everything. Just ask them, well, what's happening here, or what's going on there. And if you're out on site and you see something happening, saying, well, you know, why is that there? Why is this effluent running down here into a river, or whatever it's going to be? Which is ask for questions, and that leads to it, and that leads to a conversation. So the basic skills, yes, it's basic communication. So I think the skills that people require to be effective in the workplace are the same skills required to be effective in sales. So we focus on having really good, effective people, engineers who can communicate with staff across languages, with different organizations. They'll end up being a good base to be able to do sales. Because all sales is, you're dealing with a person, it's people buy from people.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, yeah, that's
generally
true. You have to sell yourself to your girlfriend, your wife, your friends, all of that all the time. So maybe that's one there. Is there a process or steps that you can follow to say, right, this is how I prepare when I'm going to interact with my clients, and these are my key areas that I always have to have at the back of my mind when I'm in this situation?
Absolutely, and I think sales have been around a long time. You actually have to think back at what they are, because you start doing it automatically, and it's all about preparation. Selling in anything, it's hard work. Nobody says it's easy. It's actually very hard work to do anything, preparing a report or preparing anything. It's all in the preparation. So before you do, you need to do your research. So if you're going to see somebody or a company, find out about them, who it is. And these days, it's just so much easier with access to internet and the web and all these things. It's amazing what you can find out. So before I go anywhere to any organization or see anybody, I just type their name into Google. And amazing what you can find out. So you find who they are, what they're about. So do your research beforehand. That gives you a lot of ideas of what it's about. And so when you're going to see somebody, also look for how do you make a connection? How do you connect that rapport? There's good words we always have, but say people buy from people they know, like, and trust. How do you create that relationship? And just I found probably over time experience it, but just by walking to somebody's office environment, you can see. I actually found just by walking through a car park, you can actually get an idea of what the culture of the organization is. Look in reception. What does it look like when people greet you? Walk into somebody's office when you're meeting them. Does he have a picture drawn by his kids on the wall? Does he have a rugby ball or whatever? You can create that rapport and connection. But what I have found, though, yes, you can link to that, but you have to be genuine. If you're going to, you can't fake it. You have to be genuine.
There's no faking it till you make it.
Well, not in this game, unfortunately, or you get found out quickly. So, yes, there's a process. Do your work, and then make sure you understand what the value that person wants by doing that. And often they may not know it. You have to lead them through that process by asking the right questions of what they actually need. And if you do that, it may fall away on price, because classic one, let's say you're selling a motor or a pump you do a lot of. And guy says, well, here's it. It's going to cost me X thousand. But I can get this import from another country, which costs far less. Why should I take yours? And then you start saying, well, let's have a look at what's, do they carry spares? If it breaks down, how long does it take them to get on site to fix it? Those things, you start actually taking it away from the commodity into other areas. So yes, do that work, do that preparation, understand, and then make sure that your solution can meet that, and make sure the person understands it. And it's often by asking, not telling. So it's a process, doing work, which means you have to have the skill, you have to have knowledge, you have to know your solution, you have to know your product, you have to know your engineering things. You can't go and say, hey, I'm an engineer, and then you talk rubbish. So I've learned skills. So yes, I am very good at certain areas of engineering, but it's going to take me to another. Let's say I'm a mechanical engineer. Great, take me to a chemical environment. I know something, but I'd rather say, well, let's make sure you ask the right questions. It's credibility and professional background.
Look, in the olden days, I found it interesting. Olden days, that the sales are made in the boardroom and the business done there. The statement that I made, but the relationships is built on the golf course or whatever the case might be. But they clamp down on it because there's a bit of a unfair advantage, schmoozing up the client, buying his golf club, soaring type of thing. What's your take on that?
It's a difficult one, and it always comes up because I always look for a purpose or a reason why you do something. And often as well, you shouldn't do it beforehand. Once you've got a deal, you can take it out and thank him. But interesting one. Maybe just coming back to the first point about relationships. Yes, it's maybe done in the board and works and elsewhere. I found to be effective. I've always built sales teams, and even in an organisation selling services, it's the same thing. So what we do, part of our homework, is we look at the organisation, gain that customer. We map that organisation out. So who are the key players? Who's MD? Who's this person? Maybe there's a salesperson. Maybe there's someone on the ground who's actually the maintenance engineer out on site in the middle of somewhere. Who are the key players in the decision-making tree on that? I then map our own organisation onto that and say, who's going to own those relationships? And who's going to drive it to make sure we have those relationships? That's important because it's got to be consistency. It's difficult in terms of, I come back to the whole ethics around it. It was absolutely vital. And often I say to people, well, if you do something and if you're comfortable, it's going to be on the front page of a newspaper tomorrow, in front of your family, your wife, your kids, your friends, are you going to be happy that it's out there? Okay. And if they can say, no problem, then it's fine. But if there's any element of doubt, then you mean, hold on now, be careful. So it comes down to the old golden rule of business and life. Do unto others as it haven't do unto you. And ethics is very critical, and you need to be ethical perceived. And it really is.
Yeah.
If you can answer that question, it comes within yourself. I find a lot of organizations say, well, we've got the ethical standards, we can do this or do that. I think it comes down to the individual choice of what's right or wrong.
Yeah, like bribery, corruption and under-the-table payments.
I'll give you an example of that. I mean, this is a good one, certainly as we find in these type of large, complex projects we deal with. It's a cultural thing, and I've done business all over the world in different areas. In some parts of the world, I'm going to call it the bribe or the facilitation fee, whatever you want to call it, is actually accepted practice. Then, therefore,
Commission.
Yeah. However you want to put it in there, and some of this actually goes in the financial documents. What should you do? And I found it a very hard one. What I've always come back to and said, right, I can only do what is right for me. In my environment, is it right for me or isn't it? And make my decision based on that. And it's difficult to judge because you can't really judge what's right or wrong. But if it comes out, how's it going to be? And all we can say from my experiences, don't do it. Don't stoop to that. You may get the deal once. I said, who's our best customer? One keeps coming back to us to buy again, 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 tells her friends to buy from us. You may get the single deal, but it will come out. You will get caught out. And I guess we're professional engineers. You know, one of the key things in our professionals, our PR engine and all these things, that's absolutely critical. You are professionals, and you need to stick to that.
Yeah. Some tricks in your bag. I know one of the way back they taught us that you need to know the CEO's secretary. You need to know her birthday or his birthday. Yeah. And you need to send the flowers on that day, and you need to do all of that kind of stuff. She's the gatekeeper.
Yes.
So, any other tricks that you've picked up?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of truth to that. I think there are a couple of issues around that. It depends on what your relationship is with the decision maker. If you know that have that relationship, that's fine. I'll give some tricks to get there. But yes, the gatekeeper is critical, and they definitely must be on your side. And I always told my salespeople, the first thing you give out, who gets a box of chocolates, who gets the flowers, and it's in a way that's the kind of person you can call and say, is so-and-so in, can you put me through? And it's genuine, it's not underhand, it's above board. The gatekeeper is very, very important. But you've got to be genuine on that. If you have a gatekeeper and they put you through and you upset the person, they get the blame. So you've got to be careful on that. So yes, that is critical, but there are ways, some little tricks I find. If you're not really too sure, you know the MD, and of course, hopefully you've done the research. It doesn't help. You don't go and call up a company and say, right, can I speak to the MD of a company, please? I'm not sure what his name is. Can you put me through? It's not going to happen. But these days, if you go and look at that company, you're going to find out what the name of that person is. Let's just say it's Joe Smith. So the best little trick is call the people, and you get to excuse me a second and say, can you put me through to Joe, please? Don't say, can you put me through to Mr. Smith, whatever. Put me through to Joe. Then she's not sure if you're a friend or not, whatever else. And normally it works. It's little tricks like that. You've got to be careful. You can't be underhand about it. But it just comes to the research. But I find if I call somebody like that, I really do believe I can add value to them. And if you really believe you're adding value, why shouldn't you speak to them? Why shouldn't you offer it to them? And coming back to the hardcore sales skills we talked about before, I believe that is the techniques you need to make sure that the value you have is understood. Because that's really what you're trying to do. If they understand the value, they'll buy your product or solution.
Talk to me about networking.
Yeah, it's this thing we hate normally as engineers. I mean, you tend to be fairly introverted in personality in many cases. Otherwise, so we always hate networking. And personally, I hate networking events. I hate going to these things, standing around and the cocktail parties. But it's actually very, very, very important. So networking, I think, is more about who you know. And if you don't know somebody, who do you know who knows that person? It's building that rapport. So the tricks of doing it. Networking is vital. As we said at the very beginning, if people don't know who you are, what your solution is, you can't sell anything. We sell to people. So how do we do that? So identify first who you need to see. So how do you get to see them? Or how do you know who they are? Maybe you know somebody who knows somebody. A good example of a lot of networking events around town, other ones, what I do, I may not know everybody, but I may decide, okay, so this networking event, and probably the MD or senior person of that company is going to be there. So I'll go to my colleagues who I've got a relationship with and say, well, who knows this person? They say, no, I know this person. I was at university with them, or I've done a deal with them, and say, right, when we go there, please introduce me. And I find that works very effectively. Other just networking events, when we're talking networking events, I go into the pub and say, I'm just going to meet 3 or 4 people and get that relationship going. The networking is important, but it's use your own network. We all have relationships with people, and the key thing is we get that referral. If somebody refers you, you've got credibility. A thing we always forget to do, I don't know why, maybe it's because we're a bit embarrassed about it or we just don't do it, is of our clients. However, when you've dealt with a client and they say, that's great, you've done a great job, you say, thanks very much, let's go and have a beer or let's go out. But rather say, well, that's great, can you, who else do you know who you think could value with what we're offering our services? And normally they know somebody. And most clients you have are more than willing to go and help you out.
That's interesting.
And if they do that, get them to say, well, that's great. So you know so-and-so who's head of this company who would love what we're doing or who needs building a shopping center or doing what we're doing. Can you please give them a call now and just set up an appointment for me? And get them to do it there and then. And normally they're willing to do it. So that's really the true networking that I see it, is making use of it to add value. We often think networking is, the sales guy going around drinking multiple drinks in a bar every night or whatever else. It's creating that real value add. And we all have those networks. Yeah.
If you don't ask, you'll never get.
Absolutely. And somehow we're always embarrassed to ask. And in fact,
well, I'm not that.
We are. And most people actually are willing to help. So the other way of doing it, what I found is, what I said before, is we hunt in packs. So if there's 2 of you, it's actually also easier to do that. By the way, just selling yourself, I find we always find it very hard to sell ourselves. So if you're selling services, 2 consulting engineers, go together and you can actually sell each other. I can't say I did this project and I did this and I was awarded this award. You can't do that, but your colleague will say that.
That's fine.
They actually tend to oversell you, and that works very, very effectively. So the same thing with the networking. Somehow we're more comfortable if we're colleagues together and you go and do it and introduce people. It works.
I must say that, engineers, if I look at the candidates with 11 outcomes now that they have to achieve.
Absolutely.
One of them is communication. So,
yes.
Which I find interesting, but I think we should add one, to sell your consulting services or your engineering services, because now the engineer is becoming James Bond. Need to be intelligent and look at the environment and then sell.
Well, I agree with you. That's why I said I found engineering people make very effective salespeople, because that's how we do problem solving. When we go and see a problem out on site or somewhere, we've got to design something, what do? Here's the problem. We go through and do all that work. So if we approach the sales scenario in a similar sense, how do we solve this problem? We're actually very, very good at it, and we think through it. And so we come up to all those types of solutions. But coming back to you mentioned the outcomes. One is communication, absolutely vital. But in fact, communication is at the basis of everything we do in terms of leadership, in terms of sales. But what I do, it's not just communication. Communication is, like we're talking now, I've got words coming across. Are they going in? I don't know. Are we really?
Thank you.
Well, are we really connecting? It's how do we go from that communication to the connection to really make that difference? And that's the key trick. And I find if you're effective at that as an engineer in one of the outcomes, you're going to be effective in your job. You're going to be effective as a manager, effective in dealing with your clients, prospects, your family. It just makes it different. So some little tricks on how to do it.
But how do you do it? How do you connect with people? If you're an introvert and you don't like the socially and all of that, it must be difficult to connect with people. So how can you become better at that?
Yes. I think we often come and say, well, we see these people, these great orators and speakers, and the people in the center of attention in parties are telling all the stories. And we think, oh, I'm not like that. Yeah. And in fact, that's not really connecting, because often they're doing all the talking. Connecting is a learned skill. And in fact, the most effective way I found to connect is to ask questions. So if we're having a conversation, we meet somewhere, and I go and say, okay, now tell me your background, and what do you do this? And that sounds great. What do you do that? Where did you play rugby? What did you do? Yeah. And you start talking, and you do 90% of the talking. At the end of that conversation, you go back and that was a great conversation we had, where in fact you did all the talking. Yeah. And I find when you're a little bit introverted, you almost put pressure on yourself, but I've got to respond back, I've got to add value. But if you just stand there and ask questions and then listen with intent, it works. A lot of other things you can learn, but it takes a lot of the pressure off. Take that pressure off you. The other one as well is get two people. If you're in a business, I find go somewhere with two of you. And so you're not just standing around, you've got somebody there, gives you that self-confidence and allows you to talk. But ask questions.
Where can I learn more about that? Are there books available? Is there type of training that I can go on to? I know there's these games these days that you have on your laptop and board games type of thing.
But all of the above. I think the key thing is to understand first. So what we found is when we do development of sales skills and leadership skills, we found there are three core elements to actually putting it into practice, really being effective. And we call it thinking, understanding, deploying. Actually, an acronym from Thunder. But the thinking first is important. Yes, we need to think. We need to understand. We need to get content. So yes, we do need to, whether it's reading books, going on a course, and when we do it, that would be sort of the content part of training. So you had to understand it. And engineers, we're normally pretty good at understanding. But the next one is, hold on now, we've got this, we've read the book, we've seen the site, we've read the article, or we've had this presentation from this great person. What does it mean? I need to understand it. I need to know what it actually means for me. So you need to actually, we simulate it, because you don't want to go out into the real world with all this mess up or whatever. So let's practice. Yeah. And I remember when I was started off, I hated role-playing. I loathed it. But having now come back, I just found it to be so effective. And I think the problem was it was always done incorrectly. We had this fear that people beat you up. Role-playing is not about that. And it's role-playing both in terms of simulations and things. So we do a couple of good things. I know a lot of other people do something similar. We take teams, because we're in teams, and we simulate a business. We've got a great tool, which is a board game, which we play, and it's all about sales and things, which works very effectively in teams. And why we find it so effective, when people play games, their inhibitions drop down. And open. But interesting thing we found, probably shouldn't say this because anybody plays it, the trick comes out. We found people play games exactly the same way they live their real lives. So maybe one trick is, if someone's probably going to pay the bribe in a game, watch out. If somebody's being dominant, whatever. But I found because it's in a game scenario, you can actually work with people. Let's say you're being very dominant and shouting out at people around you. I say, Johan, shut up, let this other person talk. And because it's a game, it's non-threatening. You don't take personal offense to it. If we did that in a board meeting, well, yeah. Right. So we do that, and then the next thing, once we've understood it, both in terms of role-playing and that, we've actually experiencing it around. We actually use the expression first on the board, not in the boardroom, or in a practice environment. People build up their self-confidence, and the next thing, go and deploy, actually go and do it. So we can look at the mentoring, the whole. Obviously in the engineering mentoring skills, I believe mentoring goes beyond just a technical mentoring we have. We need to go into how you do these things, how you interact, how you go to a sales process, go in together, and actually do that. What we found though, we've gone through the thinking and understanding well, and the guys have got the tricks. They just need to go and do one, and it works. And they come back almost amazed it's working, and then it just rolls from there. So coming back to where it is, yes, you need to have the knowledge. A lot of people do it, but learning how to sell the 101 sales closing techniques, which we already said aren't really what we're doing. You need to understand it. They need to understand its implication to you. Then you need to go look at that and work in a team.
What about stuff like body language? Does that really play that big role in your sales pitch or your sales technique?
It's an interesting comment. I think I'm going to say yes or no. Fundamentally, it's yes. When we communicate and connect, I think there are three elements in the communication we actually do. One is the words we're using, the words coming out my mouth, are what's being said. So that's the one aspect of it. The next one is tone, your tone of voice, what you're saying. And I guess that brings it to accents. I know I've got an English accent, which I speak too fast and all those things, but that's key. And the next one is actually your language. Move your arms around. Yes, they do come into play. I think where there's a problem, they always say, your language is 80% of it. I think is when there's a mismatch between the two. It is relevant, which is one of the reasons I always say to people, why do we have so many problems with email? When you're using email, you're just using words. So how do you actually get that across the telephone, the same thing. You tone of voice now when you see somebody there. And maybe that's one thing I found, certainly in the South African environment, having worked the world, we're still very much a face-to-face environment.
Yeah.
We like dealing face-to-face with people and overcoming that. So, yes, that's one of the key things. But the final one, maybe, on that I found is if you're passionate about what you're selling, yes, body language is important, but we can overcome it. I remember when I was younger, we were doing a big presentation, actually over in Canada. So it was different people. It was very high level, very senior people in government and the defense environment, and presentation, and a lot of good language. So, and we probably weren't the best communicators, presenters. But at the end of the day, we said, we saw your belief and passion in your product. That's why we loved it. So if you've got that passion, you may not have the best English, it may not be your home language. You may not have the best skills and all this, but the passion and belief comes through. And that's absolutely critical.
Okay. A couple of years back, the solution to fee discounting and all these sorts of problems, negotiation skills. I think everybody went on a negotiation skills course to solve the problem. What's your take on that?
Yes, we've all been on them, and negotiation is critical. I think the only message I try and get across in negotiation, and we can see a lot of things going on in the world right now, negotiation, in my mind, should lead to a win-win, not win-lose. If you go into that win-win attitude of adding value to both sides, it works. If you're genuine, it's there. So I see negotiation as a way to ensure that the value is there. And it goes on both sides. I've walked away from business where I felt the value is not there for me. It's not fair. I don't want to work with clients who I believe could be unethical and things like that. It becomes a choice. So negotiation is critical. But I see negotiation as finalizing the value adds within there. If you really want to help, you can negotiate. If you see negotiation as, I'm going to win and you're going to lose, I want the best price, you're going to get the cheapest, and you're going to pay the most, and I'm going to make the most profit. You may win that one deal, but it doesn't last. Okay. So I think it's the attitude around it which counts.
What's the biggest mistake engineers make in this sales process?
I think the key one there, we're talking about selling services, and that's what we're really talking about today. I think it's just pure lack of self-belief and confidence. People definitely buy from people, and when you're selling your services, you're selling yourself. You haven't got this product to fall back on. You may have a business card with a company name on, but at the end of the day, they're buying into you. So you've got to have that self-confidence and self-belief, and it's got to come out. And I believe most engineers have that, but somehow we sort of don't really want to say so much. We sort of shrink a little bit, and so I think one of the problems is that almost lack of self-belief, which I believe is there. A question I always ask people, and sometimes we don't like the answer to it, is would you buy from yourself? Would you buy from yourself?
No, there's a thought.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't like the answer to that, but if you can answer that and say, well, the question is, well, if you're not going to buy from yourself, I guarantee they're not. So what do you need? How does it come across to do that? So one of the self-confidence is another reason why we always insist, certainly when you've got young people or young people in sales, or young in sales, age has actually got nothing to do with it, is to go together as a team. If the two of you, probably it works. It depends on where you're selling to. If you're going to see one person, two people, you don't want more than two, you tend to overpower it. But if you're going to see a team of people, match that team. If you go on your own and you're having to present or deal with a team of 5 people, it can be very overwhelming as well. So work together. It's that self-belief and self-confidence.
All right, in conclusion, leave us with 3 thoughts that you think we can take home.
Well, coming back to one, yes, that's self-belief. Also think that as an engineer, you are inherently a good salesperson. But what we mean by sales then is somebody adds value to our clients, really adding value, absolutely critical. And that self-belief really links into that. But if anybody can do it, and it's a learned thing. It's not this major thing with people are sales and you're not. You can do it, that self-belief. I think the third one I've always found to be effective, no matter what you do it with energy, do it with passion. If you believe in what you're doing, you may have all other faults may come in, but if you believe in what you're doing, what are you doing wrong? If you really believe you're going to add value and your solution will add value, sure, it's your job then, it's your responsibility then to get it out there and make sure others have that. And all engineers can do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, Paul.
A pleasure.
Much appreciated.